Well, continuing with the study of the institution that did not consolidated their part, and after doing a little approach of the passage of the book of Daniel, it corresponds to make some historic commentaries and some accounts that are, for matters of history, important and necessary. If not, we wouldn't be contextualizing things in the order, and we repeat again, God is a God of order. Therefore, we are obliged to have order. So, for those that have studied the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, given by the very same God, and that was interpreted by the prophet Daniel, that it is important and it is fundamental to understand it in that way, because normally there exists a lot of prophets, and these prophets, as history gathers and tells, are totally lost. But they call themselves, they attribute themselves, and they present themselves as prophets of God. But when the shooting starts, as it is said, there is none left. So we have to be clear that that dream came from God, and that only the prophet of God could interpret it. That in this case was Daniel. So that dream of Nebuchadnezzar will serve us as base to teach about it, because it will be very interesting that it will change the perspective of the topic, highlighting the last part of the passage in the study, because it is there where the origin of the mark and its division is found. That we must not lose of context, because the idea of the passage is not only to look the historical fact, but the fact that is between lines, and find the truth that lies there. That is why we must not forget that we are trying to find the origins of the mark and its division. So we ask you to pay attention to the following. In the dream that Daniel interpreted, it is talk about 4 kingdoms that will occur previously to the glorious return of Jesus the Messiah. As every studious knows, the kingdoms in question were: number 1, the kingdom of gold is the Babylonian Empire, that constituted in an autocracy from 604 to 538 before the Messiah. That is why we talk about the fine gold. Then, as number 2, the kingdom of the silver breast. That was the Medes-Persian Empire that approximately was established between 538 to 333 before the Messiah, and constituted itself in a government or oligarch monarchy, inherited from an autocracy. Then it appears as number 3 as the third kingdom, the Greek Empire, founded by Alexander the Great between 490 to 146 before the Messiah, and his successors in Syria and Egypt, symbolized by the belly of brass, a military aristocrat monarchical government. And finally, number 4, the legs of iron, that symbolize the pagan Rome through the Caesars, a, between quotation marks, democratic government, from 455 to 27 before the Messiah, and hence the different successions that were given, and the consolidation of that Roman Empire that lasted in its dominion and power about a millennium approximately. So, as we can see, as we can appreciate, this way of how God saw things is quite interesting. And even though the study is not about studying prophecy or a tape of prophecy, because prophecies, depending the writers, have to be interpreted in different forms, and this occurs because prophecy has a series of elements that are changing, therefore its interpretations are varying throughout the times. This is fundamental to be known, But what calls our attention very powerfully is this dream. And it calls our attention because it will reveal or say something to us. We have established a geopolitical and military meaning to the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. What you don't know is that in addition to this meaning, there exists others that must be consistent with the revelation of the book of Apocalypse. And even though we will not stop to study the statue of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, which will be interesting, we believe it will be something spectacular, yes, we will make a brief approach of the last part of it to be able to comprehend the things that have been lost throughout the times, and others that have turned obscure and deceitful in our era. This is an extraordinary thing. There are things that have been lost throughout the times, and that loss has led us to be unable to comprehend the things and not knowing with clarity where to locate them in the scriptures. And this is a serious problem because insofar that the past is disconnected from the present and the future suffers it, in that measure we go astray and get lost. And this has happened with countless of things in humanity. There is a number of knowledge, recipes, principles, teachings that existed in ancient times, but today are history. If not, let's look at the particular case of what happened in the great library of Alexandria. All that was lost in the historical fire that history registers until nowadays. How many texts in the scriptures are spoken of and were lost, that we do not have knowledge of them? So it is here where we have a serious problem, that there are things that have been astray or lost and that we cannot reference nor catalog, much less use them anymore. That is why it is fundamental, the revelation and the interpretation coming only from the Holy Spirit, because otherwise we won't be able to comprehend. To that conclusion Jesus the Messiah arrived when saying, "They seeing, see not, and hearing, they hear not." And that is very delicate, because when one arrives to such extremes, we are so astray and get lost that no matter how much they talk or say something to us, we cannot capture it and we cannot understand it. How many people today are in streets and seeing, see not, and hearing, hear not, and cannot reflect, much less change, because that spiritual and mental blindness doesn't allow them to act, doesn't allow them to look where they are heading to, doesn't allow them to avoid their destruction. That is why this theme is fundamental. That is why it is fundamental that you understand that seeing you are not seeing and hearing you are not hearing. That is why you suffer. You are lacking things because God can no longer reach you because of this same circumstance, and all because knowledge has been losing until nowadays, that barbarities, lies, deceits and falsehoods are being said, and all sponsored by the mystery of iniquity. The moment has come in which you question things, that you think and ask yourself if seeing you see not, and if hearing you hear not. Fundamental words, direct words, words with a unique content, expressed by the very same Jesus the Messiah. Before concluding, we would like you to invite to visit our webpage of the Church of God. Its address is churchofgod.tk. There you can read some materials, some studies, some teachings, and you can ask for the lessons through our email. The Church of God also puts to your disposition some Facebook pages. We also take the opportunity to communicate to you that you can write us sending your concerns, your questions, your doubts, your questionings to the following address: the last church 7 in number, okay, gmail.com. We will gladly attend your concerns, your questions, and doubts. Thank you very much.